Welcome to Beyond Boundaries, a series of virtual sessions initiated by Takshila Educational Society to further ideas that foster learning, self-expression, and ingenuity. We at Takshila are keen on connecting young minds to an unbound range of themes, thoughts, and perspectives that facilitate their understanding of the world and its concerns. At this time of global crises and social distancing, the sessions under Beyond Boundaries bring articulate speakers from the world of art, education, literature, science, and beyond to engage your time and mind. Today, in the first part of the session titled How to Read a Film, our speaker, Kunal Ray, introduces ways to interpret and appreciate the art of cinema. Kunal Ray is an arts commentator and professor of literary and cultural studies. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in English literature and is currently pursuing his doctorate. He has taught at Fergusson College and Flame University in Pune. Kunal's writings are published regularly in leading newspapers. He has co-edited the essay collection titled Shabd Aur Sangeet, Unravelling Song Text in India. The speaker would converse for about 30 minutes on the topic. You may submit questions through the chat box on your YouTube channel. All questions from the viewers would be answered collectively by the speaker in the last 15 minutes of the session. We now begin. Over to our speaker, Kunal Ray.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Setika, for that wonderful introduction. Very kind of you to say those words. I also want to thank Beyond Boundaries, this beautifully conceived series of lectures, and the Takshila Foundation for giving me this opportunity to speak to my young friends today who are listening from different parts of the country. Before I directly jump into the title of the talk, I just want to open by saying a few facts, perhaps things that you already know about cinema in India. So we are the largest filmmaking nation in the world. We make about 2,000 films every year, and that says a lot about cinema in this country and what cinema means to us and how excited and interested we are in cinema. But when I say we make 2,000 films a year, I'm sure all of us know and understand that these are just not Hindi films. These are films made in different parts of the country, in different languages, perhaps representative of the diversity of ideas, of cultures, of languages, of music that this country has to represent. And cinema is one of the ways of doing that, sort of a vehicle to showcase that diversity of expression. So when I say that we make 2,000 films every year, these are films beyond Bollywood. These are films beyond the cinema that's made, produced from Mumbai. There are Tamil films, there are Malayalam films, there are Odia films, there are Bengali films. And for the last few years, actually, I've been watching Tamil cinema and Malayalam cinema with great interest. And trust you me, you will not be disappointed if your interest had to shift from Hindi cinema to some of these other cinemas. So I strongly believe that in India, we have many cinemas, right? Though often we like to think, or perhaps our popular culture would like to tell us that Hindi cinema is the most important cinema, or Hindi cinema is the kind of cinema that we ought to watch. And I strongly disagree with that kind of a sentiment. I think the best films that are being made in the country today are happening in cinema beyond Mumbai. So I strongly encourage you and urge you to watch those films. Some of the other changes that have happened in the recent times in the way we see films is also, so we would go to a theater to see films, but we're also watching films online now. We're watching films on Netflix, we are watching films on Hotstar, we are watching films on Amazon Prime, and now under lockdown, all of us are sitting at home and doing that. And it's just not that some of the old films have been archived for us on this online platforms, that there are new films also being specially made, funded by many of these online platforms, and exclusively these films are offered here for our viewership. So I wanted to set this up perhaps to make a point that cinema is really big in India. We take cinema seriously, or we ought to take cinema seriously, and we think about cinema. And of course, I mean, there are changes happening and cinema is perhaps also evolving. Now I called the title of the talk is, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation to show you, because I don't even use PowerPoint presentations when I normally talk to my students. I make notes, and I'm going to refer to my notes while I speak to you. And as Ritika mentioned in her introduction, if there are questions, I'll be very happy to take questions at the end of what I have to say. So my talk is titled How to Read a Film. And I'm sure many of you would be intrigued that why am I saying read instead of how to watch a film or how to see a film? I should also tell you that How to Read a Film is a very well-known book by James Monaco. It's a book that a lot of film theorists, film study scholars would tell you to read, kind of deconstructing how to look at cinema, how to read cinema, how to appreciate cinema better. So the title of my talk, though I'm not talking about the book, but the title is also borrowed from the book, How to Read a Film. Now, coming back to what I was saying, that why am I saying instead of seeing film, instead of watching film, why do I say how to read film? So, of course, we see films, but when I say read, I'm also suggesting some kind of an active engagement with cinema. So we see characters, but we also read characters. We also read plot. We also read where the film is set. We read what people are saying to each other, right? So this is seeing definitely, but we just not stop with seeing. I think that's a beginning that we are making with seeing, and that's much more to do with cinema, which goes beyond seeing. And that is where I think the word read or reading becomes very important, because it's also closely tied with the idea of understanding, with the idea of analysis, and with the idea of how do we decipher what's happening on screen. Um, and as I said, that cinema is just not for entertainment. We use cinema to think about a lot of things. A lot of social issues are discussed through cinema. Cinema shows us our reality. Often cinema can be an escape. We have all types of films, right? So multiple things are happening through cinema. At the same time, I think that cinema is extremely educative. Cinema creates knowledge. Cinema creates access. Um, for instance, I've never been to a place like, I've never been to Iran. I've never been to Argentina. I've never been to Brazil. And there's so many parts of the world that I have never visited. But I have an encounter with these parts of the world through cinema. Cinema has facilitated this encounter for me. And how did that happen? I witnessed stories about people who live in these parts of the world. I have seen their lives as reflected in or through cinema. I have seen their struggles. I have seen their concerns. Um, I have seen how daily life plays out. Um, I, I have perhaps seen a film which shows a young girl going to school in rural Brazil, and what are her expectations. So cinema is a medium for multiple stories, and these stories are about people. These are human stories, right? And there are some people who are like us, people like you, people like me, and we immediately identify with them because they perhaps speak the same language as us. They look like us. They maybe come from the same socio-cultural background. Maybe they're all students of English medium schools. Maybe they all live in cities like people who are listening to this talk perhaps do. But there are also people who are not like us. There are people who don't speak English. There are people perhaps who don't enjoy our privilege. There are also people who don't share a lot of things that we have in common. I think cinema also creates this encounter for people like me who have never been to those parts of the world, or even this parts of the country, to see those people who are not like me, who are not like us. And that's why I say that cinema is extremely educative. Cinema creates knowledge. Cinema creates access to a bank of stories, to a world that I did not know anything about. And just to give you a little example, I remember the first time I went to the United States of America, and I was walking around New York. That was my first trip, but I already had a visual memory of New York. And how was this visual memory of New York created? Because I had seen American cinema, because I had seen Martin Scorsese films, because I had seen a film like Taxi Driver, and I had seen so many other films. So when I was walking in and around New York, parts of Brooklyn, and so many other parts, I felt that I know this, and I felt this place somehow. I knew parts of where I'm walking around. And how did this happen? Because I had a visual memory created through cinema. And it's not as if many of these things you think consciously when we are watching cinema. Maybe many of these things also occur to us much later, after the film is done, after the viewing is done, and then you begin to reflect and think and ask some of these questions. So cinema is knowledge. Cinema creates access. Cinema gives me access to multiple stories, people whose lives I knew nothing about, whose struggles I did not know anything about. And cinema is also history in so many ways. Cinema is a great source of documentation. So cinema does multiple things. And the point I'm trying to make here is that cinema is much more than entertainment. I'm sure cinema is fun. Cinema is pleasure. We love to go to a film theater with our friends and family and enjoy our popcorn and watch a nice film followed by a good dinner and come back home and sleep over it. That kind of cinema also exists, but cinema is much more than just the Saturday trip that we make to a multiplex to watch films. Um, so now coming back to the title of my talk, when I'm saying how to read a film, a few things that I would like to indicate in my talk when I say how do we read cinema. Uh, so cinema does not exist in a vacuum. All of us know that. Right? Cinema, there is a context. Something contains the film. And what contains the film? Cinema is set in somewhere. Like I was giving an example of New York, or when you watch your Harry Potter films, or you watch your Spider-Man, so many films. Cinema is always located somewhere. There is a location, there is a place. It could be a city, it could be a village, it could be sort of your neighborhood, it could be a park, it could be a location like a school. Cinema is always set somewhere. So the first thing, it's not as if I'm trying to give you a chronology, but I'm trying to suggest that what are the things we look for, or how to read. So one of the things we also look for is, where is the film set in? Where is it happening? 1970s United States of America, 1990s New Delhi, 2019 Pune, 2020 Bombay or Coimbatore. What is the location of the film? What time is it, right? And depending on that location and time, what is cinema trying to tell me? And as I said, what is the film about? The film is about certain people. So what are these people doing in 1970s New York? What are these people doing in 1990 Delhi? Right? So where is the film set in? Right? The film has a social context. So what is the social context of the film? What time is it indicating? What kind of people? Their lives? What manifestation do I see? These are some of my primary questions, and perhaps some of the things that I'm looking for when I'm watching a film. To uh, Then the next thing to look for is, or perhaps the questions that I have when I'm watching a film is, what is the story of the film? What is the film trying to tell me? Indeed, there are too many people in the film. Right? But what is the fundamental story of the film? Let me give you a small example. I'm sure a film like something like Gully Boy, I'm trying to think of an example, a film that many of you would have seen. So what is the story of Gully Boy? What is Gully Boy trying to tell us? It is set in Dharavi in Mumbai. The film also creates an encounter for me, because I'm sure all of us have our Mumbai tour. All of us have our Mumbai stories, but perhaps there are parts of the city that we're more familiar with as opposed to others. So the film also takes me into the interiors of a place that I had no knowledge about. I of course knew it existed, but I've never been there. Right? So I've seen it in newspapers, I've seen it in documentaries, and here I was watching it on the big screen, taking me to this small sort of lanes uh, inside this particular place that the film is set in, and how people live. What do they do? Right? I had absolutely no idea, no visual memory, no visual clue. Right? So when you see the film, yes, indeed, the film has a particular location. The film is set somewhere. There are characters, but then what are these characters doing in the film? So you see the central characters, right? And there is a love story there, but it's just not love story. There is a story of struggle, right? There's also a story of music that is happening. You see some people who are creating rap. And where is this rap music coming from? This rap music is coming from their lived life, their experiences of living life, their daily struggles, right, to make ends meet. And none of these people have the luxury of being just musicians or artists. They have to work to support their families. And over and above, they want to create music. So my question is, what is the story then? Yes, the film is set somewhere, and I know where the film is set in. The film is about these two people and their friends and people around them. All that is fine. But then what finally is the film trying to tell me? After having conveyed a sense of place, after having conveyed a sense of location, after having told me who these people are, what is the story that the film is trying to say? And I realized that perhaps there is never a single story. There are always multiple things maybe that a film is trying to indicate. Though I have a primary central character, a male central character, a female central character, but there's also a world around them. And when I look at the world around them, I find so many different stories. So indeed, perhaps for many of you would say that what is there? It's just a story of love between this young man and this woman, but there's so much more to the film than just that central story of love, story of struggle, story of music, story of trying to be an artist. Right. So that's one of my other questions, that what is the film really trying to say? And I think each one of us will also see a film very differently. So for me, perhaps in this particular film that I was trying to talk to you about, that this thing stood out to me when I was watching the film. Maybe when you watch out, some other element will stand out. And you would perhaps disagree and turn around and tell me, I don't think the film was about this, the film was about that. And let me tell you, it's a perfectly valid approach to watching a film, because to each of us, perhaps we'll find our own stories when we are watching films, because we are also watching films as individuals, right? We are watching films from a certain place and time and location. We are also watching films with what we already know, with what we already know about cinema, about the world that we live in, the world that we come from. So we're also taking that knowledge to cinema, to the film that we are trying to watch. So we are looking for setting, where is the film setting? We are looking for what is the story? We are looking for characters, because how is the story reaching you? The story is also reaching you through characters, right? People in the film and people around those central characters. The other thing that I want to talk about is visuals, images, because cinema is essentially an image-based medium. It's a visual medium. So when you think of cinema as a visual medium, because what is the difference then between, say, when you're reading a novel and you're reading a film? That when you're reading a novel, a text-based medium, as opposed to a film, which is an image-based medium. So when I'm also reading a film, I'm paying very, very close attention to visuals. How does the film open? How does the film end? Right? What are the visuals used to establish the character? Like I remember in this film that I was watching, perhaps Gully Boy, and you see this character who's waiting at a bus stop almost every day to board a bus and reach his place of work or wherever he was going, right? And one of the memories that I have from the film is that bus stop. Not the now it's a very strong visual clue. It's a strong visual clue because one, it helps me to understand um, um, sort of what is sort of part of routine for this character, right, in his life. Just before I got on to speak to you, I was watching this wonderful film called Gamak Ghar. It's a film that's set in rural Bihar. It's made by a young filmmaker, somebody who's like in his early 20s, called Achal Mishra. It's a film set in the Madhopur village, and there's very little dialogue. In fact, even if you mute the film, even if you don't play the dialogue, if you mute the dialogue, the film would still stand out. Why would it stand out? Because there are such strong visuals in the film that you can almost construct a narrative through the visuals. The visuals will help you to understand that what the filmmaker is trying to say. The filmmaker is trying to talk about the idea of home. The filmmaker is also lamenting the home that he had. I don't know if it's his home, but at the center of the film is a home. It's an old family home in sort of village, and where people used to go during extended sort of holidays and festivals and sort of things like that. But now they don't have time anymore because they're all busy with their lives in the city. So they barely have time to go back. So what's happening to that home? And he's using some startling images to convey that sense of that I had something which I don't have anymore. So cinema is also a strong visual medium. Yes, we are looking at characters, we're looking at what they are speaking, we're looking at how they are saying it and what they are saying, but we're also seeing that how is it all being shown? You know, how is the village being shown? What are the markers of that place? How do I remember that place? So when I'm also seeing a film, visuals play a very important role, and I think um, images are also helping me to understand what is this film all about. So I'm listening to dialogue, I'm listening to everything that where is the film set in, what are the characters doing, at the same time paying very, very close attention to visuals that are there in the film. Other than that, there is camera, there is editing, there is sound, there's coloring, there are a lot of components, right? So cinema is not an individual's work. Cinema is made by a group of people who come together, perhaps, to collaborate or to participate in a shared vision. And it's not as if that somebody just picks up a camera and decides to go and shoot, but that could also happen, but it also takes a lot of work. that when script is being written, screenplay is being written, that somebody is actually researching the film, right? You think about what is the film going to be, what is the story that I want to narrate. So the pre-production of the film, where many of these questions are discussed and these questions are raised, and post-production is when the editing happens, the coloring happens, sound, and all these things. So the pre-production and post-production. And alongside fiction cinema, we also have, I mean, I was largely talking to you about fiction feature films, but we also have documentary cinema. And there's a very strong tradition of documentary cinema even in India. Perhaps I'll save it for another day when I talk to you, maybe in the next talk, I can talk to you a little bit more about documentary cinema. But I want you to be aware also of the documentary filmmaking culture, all right? So also, when we're watching films as audiences, we have certain expectations from films. As I said, that some of us go and watch films, cinema as entertainment, and you don't want to think while you are watching films. But what kind of films do we really need in this country? It's not as if I'm trying to give a template to suggest that these are the kind of films this country ought to make. But also, when we as audiences are going and watching films, or when films are being made, I think there are certain very important considerations to keep in mind. That we need a more inclusive cinema. We need a cinema that shows people like us, but also people who are not like us. A cinema that represents all kinds of people. A cinema that actually represents diversity. A cinema that represents all kinds of, all communities, languages, right? So a cinema which is inclusive. And I think if that happens, we'll gradually start moving towards a more inclusive cinema. I'm not saying that these things are not happening, but perhaps these things need to happen much more than what is happening or is currently ongoing. And we'll gradually move towards a more inclusive cinema, where we see many more people, where we see many more stories, where the characters, okay, I hope the image is better. Yeah. So where we see different kinds of people, where we see different kinds of stories, and just not people like us, sort of middle class, upper middle class, but the NRIs that we see in a certain kind of Hindi cinema. Cinema towards more inclusive. The other thing I think very important for us to think about is that representation of women in our films, right? How do we show women in our films? What are women doing in our films? And if I were to give you certain examples of certain films, the way we objectify women is very problematic, right? So also us as young people who will make films, who are thinking about films, who are writing about films, these are very important things for us to think about, that we should not glorify violence. We should not glorify objectification. We should not glorify or we should not romanticize violence, which a lot of, even recently, perhaps I don't want to mention names, I don't want to give you examples. You perhaps know the kind of films I'm talking about, which confuse violence with romance. But this is some kind of a romantic behavior, trying to normalize deviance as romance, which is problematic. So we have to sort of gradually move towards a more inclusive cinema, different stories. We have to think about women in our films, the characters that we write in our films, and what are we showing, what are we saying, and what kind of cinema do we really want to make. Because I think cinema is a very important vehicle. Cinema is a very important vehicle. Cinema could be a potentially important vehicle for social change. But for cinema to transform into a really potential vehicle for social change, cinema has to perform a few things. Cinema has to take into consideration a few things. And these are some of the things that I've tried to share with you, right? So if I were to conclude, because I would love to take some questions from you, I'm sure you have a lot of things to say. So as I said, cinema is much more than entertainment. Cinema makes us think. Cinema gives us access. When we are looking at a film, where is the film set? Who are these people? Where do they come from? What is the story, or what are the stories the film is trying to narrate? What happens when people from different worlds, different sort of economic backgrounds, different socio-cultural contexts meet? What happens then, and how does cinema capture that? Right? What are the visuals in the film say? I also have to think about how to look at visuals, the different aspects of film, and different people coming together to collaborate to make good cinema, right? And then our responsibility is also that when good films are being made, that we have to go and see these good films. And I'm sure, people are writing about these films. I see a lot of writing. When I see some good film that is happening, I see a lot of people writing about this cinema. So it's not as if that each one of us have to be a newspaper columnist or we have to be a reviewer, but I think we have a responsibility. We can write about those films even on our social media platforms. We can tweet about them. We can put them up on our Instagram. When we see good cinema is happening, I think it's also our responsibility to support that good cinema and support in whichever way we can. That we go and we tell our friends that please go and watch it, and sort of circulate the information amongst our networks. That is important. So that is the role that we can play, to go and watch this kind of cinema, to support this kind of cinema. And this process of dialogue has to continue, to ask questions of our films, of our filmmaking practices, of our filmmakers, because I think questions ought to be asked. And at the end, as I said, that if you really want cinema to be social vehicle, our filmmakers have to think. At the same time, we also have to think, because we have a very important role to play in it. Because what kind of cinema do we want? If we decide that we will not go to theaters to watch a certain kind of cinema, that cinema won't be made. Right? At the same time, if we decide that we will go and support a kind of cinema, which we think is important cinema, those films will be made. So we also have a very important role here to play. And I think we have to think about all these things that I just tried to highlight and touch upon when it comes to cinema, thinking about cinema, and perhaps also supporting cinema in whichever way we can. Um, I will be very happy to take questions. Uh, uh, okay, so there's a question about reviews. So let me also tell you something. I'm glad Shraddha asked this question about reviews. You have to understand that an individual is reviewing a film. If I'm reviewing a film, it's also my take on the film. Now, as I said also in my talk, that your take could be very different from mine. Yeah, we have different likes and we have different dislikes. So I don't think a review should entirely determine whether you should go and watch a film or not. um, I don't let reviews dictate to me. I don't let reviews tell me if I should go watch a film or not. I go and I see a film if I want to see it. And there have been so many occasions when I've been disappointed. There was a great review, but the film turned out to be quite disappointing. And there was a bad review, and the film was a complete surprise. Right? So they're both kind of some experiences to share. So I think go watch a film and then you decide. I mean, write your own review. And I said you don't need a newspaper to write your review. You can do your review on your Facebook. You can do your review on your Twitter. You can write a little note and circulate it amongst your friends. Send an email to your friends. So there are different ways of doing film reviews. The other thing we all know, look at the media ecosystem in the country, how the media ecosystem has changed. And we also know that reviews can be influenced. So there is that as well. So we have to be very careful when it comes to film reviews. Okay. Yes, so there's a question about item numbers. So when I was talking of objectification of women, that's one of the things, that what are these item numbers really doing in Hindi films? Are the item numbers really adding anything to the character that I see, to the plot of the film, to the story? Before you know, there is an item number, and often this item number is there because that will pull in a lot of people perhaps to go and see the film, because they're also expecting to see a few things in cinema, and that cinema will also cater to what they want. And most of the times, these item numbers have absolutely no role to play. That these item numbers are there for some cheap sensation and thrill and nothing else. And indeed, the way women are depicted or used in these item numbers is very problematic. Okay, there are also questions about parallel cinema and art cinema. So the thing is that I personally don't subscribe to these labels of this is art cinema and this is non-art cinema. I think for me, it's good cinema and bad cinema. And who tells you what is good cinema and bad cinema? That's very hard to decide, because I don't let anybody dictate to me. I don't let anybody decide for me or on my behalf what's good cinema or what's bad cinema. That's a decision that I will have to make. And how does that happen? That happens when you watch films, right? Because it also takes practice. In music, we have this wonderful term called riyaz. So I'm sure you have been speaking to musicians. I know a lot of musicians come to your school to perform. You attend concerts. As part of the series also, I'm sure you have been in conversation with some musicians, and they speak of riyaz. So what does this riyaz mean? So riyaz is a regular practice. So So it's not as if that you only need Riyaz for music. You need Riyaz for a lot of things. You need Riyaz for painting. You need Riyaz for writing. It's basically setting out time that you will do this activity on a regular basis. So this also helps you to hone your craft further. So I think film watching and deciding good and bad is also needs a certain kind of Riyaz. When you begin to watch films, and after having seen a certain number of films, perhaps you'll be able to decide for yourself, or at least you can form an opinion, and you can sort of judge for yourself, decide for yourself that this is good cinema, this is bad cinema, this works for me, this does not work for me. And then the question to ask yourself is why? Why does this work for me? Why does this not work for me? That to me is a very important question to watch. But for this to be able to arrive at that particular stage, what is important is extensive film viewing, right? And trust me, there's so many curated lists these days that's online. So you may not even have to do your homework, right? If you Google up, perhaps there will be a list that's up, and you can go and watch some films available on any platform, and you can go and start and watch some of these films. Like I remember, if you read a lot of people who begin to talk about the foreign cinema that they were watching. Satyajit Ray, in fact, in his book, he writes about John Ford's films, which he loved watching. He writes about Bicycle Thief, and he says that's the film that I saw, and it sort of changed my life, and I decided that I want to be a filmmaker. So I think to also the riyaz for understanding cinema is to watch cinema. So you have to watch more cinema, and then perhaps you can decide and determine for yourselves what's good cinema, what's bad cinema. Though in India, we definitely see there is a movement, even now as I speak, there's so many different kinds of stories that are being written, new scripts that are being written, which wouldn't have happened maybe in the 1990s. But I see many of these films that are being made today. So I do see possibilities. It's not as if nothing is happening. I don't want to reject many of these new things that are happening today. Okay, many questions. I spoke about good cinema. I think read more. Please read more, watch more, and gradually you'll be able to decide, and perhaps you'll reach a stage when you can decide for yourself what's good or bad. Other than that, read about cinema. You know, like you're watching cinema, that's a kind of riyaz. There's so much that's written about cinema. There's so many good books that are written about cinema. Read what film directors have written about cinema. There's so many conversations that are available on cinema. So I think reading all of those will also prepare you to look at cinema, to understand cinema much better, right? And there's so much of writing that's available for free online. So please read. So read about cinema, watch cinema. These are things that you could do. Okay, somebody's asking me what are the best practices should I start? I aspire to be a screenplay writer. That's great. You love writing plays, which is wonderful, and I wish you good luck. You know, I think it's important to read and read extensively, because if you ask me that I want to be a filmmaker, what should I read? And I don't know what to tell you, because I don't think just reading filmmaking books will make you a filmmaker. I think you have to read extensively. I think you have to read whatever you get your hands on. Read history, read sociology, read whatever you can. Read philosophy, but reading extensively. I think reading is important. Read literature. There is a very close connection between literature and cinema. If you look at cinema, sort of cinema history, look at the way literature is so closely linked. Cinema is so closely linked with literature. That so many novels have been turned into films. So many short stories have been turned into films. Why do you think that happens? That also speaks of this close kind of connection that exists between these two art forms. So I would say that anybody, whether you want to be a film writer, you want to be a novelist, you must read. So read as much as you can, watch as many films as you can. I think these are very important things to do. Okay, theater and cinema, what is the connect? Well, you know, in theater, when there are no retakes, right? You go up on stage and you perform live. That's a different thrill of performing live in front of a live audience. Whereas in cinema, as you know, I was speaking of pre-production, post-production, multiple takes. So there, and also when you're writing for theater, when you're writing for cinema, you're also thinking of two different kinds of logistics, right? Perhaps you're also thinking of two different kinds of audiences when you're writing for theater, when you're writing for cinema. So multiple differences, many differences. Okay, somebody's asking me, the movie doesn't have a... My parents are very strict about what I watch. Thing is, in absence of realities of life, the movie doesn't have a full. Any advice for them? I don't know if I have a piece of advice to share for your parents. But I'm sure they'll let you watch good cinema. Maybe when you are reading up about good films, maybe point that out to your parents and tell them that, look, this is good cinema, and so many people have written about it. They said this is important cinema. So please let me watch it. I'll learn something. So that's exactly what I was trying to say in the very beginning when you opened my talk, that cinema is much more than Saturday night entertainment. Right? Perhaps we just think of cinema just as fun, but there's definitely fun, but there's more than fun. And maybe you can help your parents realize and understand the beyond fun part of cinema, and maybe sit them down together and watch a film. And I'm sure they will also understand that what is happening in this film and why does a child want to watch this film, and the realities, as you said, and I'm glad you used that term, because and how the realities are being captured in a film. Uh, Film recommendations, authentic links. I can't think of links right now, but what I could do is, if I find up some good links, I could share them with your institution, and your institution will be able to share them with you. I can't think of any links at this point, but there are many. But I'll find some of these links and I'll forward them. uh, Okay, I feel the books converted into films lose their charm. What's your take? I speak a lot about this because I also teach a course on adaptation studies, where I usually talk about what happens, what is the process of translation, what the process of transfer from literature to film. So what we have to understand is that these are two very different mediums, right? The medium of writing a novel, because writing a novel, you are sitting at home and you're writing a novel. It's between you and your laptop, or you're going to a cafe and you have a notebook and you're sitting and writing a novel. Filmmaking is very different, as all of us know. It's not as simple. So naturally, the economy is very different. The questions of economics that are interlinked and connected are also very, very different. And these are two different art forms. The demands are also very different, right? So that's something that we have to understand at the very beginning. Um, the other thing here is that when I'm thinking of the novel, like, the novel is a writer's prerogative. The writer can do whatever the writer wants with the novel. The writer gives you characters, the writer gives you multiple plots and subplots. The writer decides how the story will play out. Similarly, the film is also the filmmaker prerogative. So, like, we allow the writer, or like, the writer can decide what a novel should do. Similarly, I think a filmmaker can decide what the film should do, how the film should look, how the film should be structured, right? And I am okay with this if the filmmaker is also taking certain liberties here, because you have to understand that though it's an adaptation, but it is also a story that the filmmaker is trying to tell you. So sometimes there is this problem of, what happens when a text is adapted. But for me, when I'm watching a film, I think of the film as a new work that I'm seeing. I just don't think of a film as derived from the novel, or as derived from literature, or as derived from a short story. I think of a film as a new work of art, and I'm looking at a new work of art. So that's how I look at a film. Uh, uh, Favorite movie of all time? It's a very difficult question. You asked me a very difficult question. If you ask me favorite movie of all time, if you ask me favorite book of all time, very difficult question to answer. Um, um, I watch a lot of films. I watch all kinds of films. Recently, under lockdown, I've been watching a lot of cinema on Netflix and Amazon, which I didn't do even until last year. Though I had the subscriptions, but I barely had time to watch Netflix and Amazon. But now I am watching, and I'm finding some incredible. Like on Netflix, I saw this wonderful film called A Happy Family. It's a film from Georgia. Now, I know very little about Georgia, right? But the film, while watching the film, because before I started watching, there's a little information about the film, and in the information it tells me that what kind of social structure, what kind of family structure still exists in Georgia. So I was informed through the little synopsis of the film that I read, and then I saw the film and I was completely startled. And when I saw the film, and I'm like, who's the filmmaker? So I went back and I read some more about the filmmaker, and I saw that they made some other films. And I said, well, if I like this, I do want to see what are the other films that they have made. Well, I still haven't been successful in locating many of these films, but I do want to see. So what I'm trying to say is that an interest was created because I liked what I saw, and I felt that I want to know these filmmakers more. One of my all-time favorites, because you're also asking about filmmaker, I don't know if you know about this Iranian filmmaker called Abbas Kiarostami. Maybe I can type out the. Okay, here you have the name. Abbas Kiarostami, filmmaker from Iran. absolutely stunning cinema. I have seen a lot of his films when I was in college, all throughout. These are films that you can keep returning back to. And every time I go back and I see these films, I see new things that I hadn't seen before. Um, so I've been watching a lot of his films recently. I'm going back and watching things, and I'm sort of thinking to myself that why didn't I see this when I saw this film some years ago? And how come I'm noticing it now when I'm watching it in 2020? So he's one filmmaker whose work I really like. Um, um, uh, all of us know about Satyajit Ray, definitely. I mean, I like some of his films. I also like the work of another filmmaker called Ritwik Ghatak, filmmaker from Bengal, Ray's contemporary. Ritwik Ghatak, absolutely brilliant films. So I've been watching some of his films, also keep revisiting some of his films. Um, I've also been watching a lot of Malayalam cinema, to tell you the truth. A lot of Malayalam cinema, and I've been watching it with great interest. In fact, I've also written about Malayalam cinema, and I would love to write more about Malayalam cinema. So cinema from Kerala, um, and and these are, I think there is so much for us to learn from this new breed of contemporary Malayalam films, because they are making, so this idea of what is art cinema, what is commercial cinema, when you look at these films, you don't know what to call them. Are they art films or are they commercial films? I think they are making art, if at all. I told you I don't like to use these terms, I don't like to use these categorizations, but I think perhaps they're making art cinema in the format of commercial films. Such convincing stories about people, who lived in that part of the country, which is not my part, because I've been there as a tourist, I've been there as a visitor, I've just been there to meet friends. I don't live there, right? So I don't know maybe the realities of that place. So these films are also helping me to understand that, and perhaps people I don't know about, I don't know their stories. So I've also been watching a lot of contemporary Malayalam cinema, absolutely brilliant stuff, brilliant storytelling, great direction, great stories, great performances. So that's one cinema that I've been watching with great interest. Okay, there's some more questions, which is okay, favorite movie of all time. Mm, movies, magic, and piracy. Piracy is horrible. Nobody supports piracy. No, never. But I think now, we have so many more platforms to watch cinema, as I was saying. Um, uh, so now that we have platforms, I mean, consciously we have to reject this, right? And we have other avenues to watch films. So let us move towards those avenues and watch films there, and watch films the right way. Because I mean, nobody supports piracy. You cannot support piracy. Mm. So consciously, so you consciously make a choice. You consciously make a decision that you won't do it. Uh, of course, films have agendas. Films definitely have an agenda, and this part of agenda could also is, I think, linked with the point about stories that I was saying. What is the story of the film? So when you say do films have agenda, perhaps also what is the filmmaker's agenda? Similarly, does a filmmaker have an ideology? I think everybody should have an ideology. I think filmmakers have that ideology, and through their films, they're definitely trying to put forward that ideology. Now, that ideology, you may like it, you may dislike it, you may agree with it, you may disagree with it. That's a different conversation altogether. But I have a point of view, and I have a story to tell, and I am trying to say that through my film, because it's my film, or it is my novel, it's my book, and I have every right to put forward that. You may disagree with it, you may reject it, you may fight with me, you may question me. That's perfectly all right. But so when you say do films have agenda, how can the viewers know the distinction? Now the thing is that knowing the distinction is one is, I mean, when you look at the story carefully, what is the story trying to say? How is the story being said? The other thing also to identify that what is wrong that's happening here. For that, we have to know our history well. We have to know the context well. We have to know the setting well. I have written about this in some articles that I have done, where I've said that, look, this is not how it happened historically. But if the film is trying to tell me this is how it happened historically, perhaps it is trying to turn a historical wrong into right. And that's a horrible thing that the film is trying to do. But how did I know? I knew this because maybe I knew the event, or I knew the incident, or I knew the time and place that the film is set in. So it's also about that. I think we have to be very conscious about these things that we are watching. We have to know what we are watching. That's very important. Uh, Subtitles, hard work, lots of work. I have very little sort of experience of subtitles, but some friends who have made short films and I've had to subtitle them, you have to watch it again and again and again, multiple times, right? And then comes the process of subtitling. So it's not as if you watch a film and the subtitle happens, and the subtitling is what, again, I'm not a professional subtitle person. Perhaps this question should also be asked to somebody who does subtitles professionally on a regular basis. I'm not that person. I have very little experience, but I could tell you it's hard work, it's demanding work. It doesn't happen that you watch a film and you're doing subtitling. You need to watch the film multiple times to even understand, right? What's the tone of the film? What's the mood of the film? And also, because we're also talking of language, so one word has multiple synonyms, right? And this is happening in Hindi. I have to translate into English, or Malayalam to English, or Tamil to English. So what's the right word? What's the most accurate expression here to go with the dialogue that I'm watching in the film? So those are very creative decisions to take. Okay. Okay. Well, if you see cinema, beginning of cinema is with silent cinema, and gradually the transition from silent to sound. There is a lot of, I think some of you saw this Hollywood film called The Artist, which was trying to capture the silent cinema period, the beginning of cinema, inception of cinema with silent cinema, and then gradually sound is introduced, and then gradually sort of color is introduced, and how sort of many of these transitions are happening. But that's kind of film history about that. I sometimes do this exercise with my students. I show them a film. I try and mute the sound, and it's not a film. Perhaps I'm showing them a scene, and I'm like, "Well, see what the scene is doing to you." Without any dialogue, without any background score, nothing. You just watch people and their movements, and then I unmute the sound and I try and record what their uh, expressions are, and I try and understand that how they react differently with sound and without sound, and that's a fun experiment to do. Perhaps you could do it as well. Well, Malayalam films have, I mean, I don't speak the language, I don't understand, but all these films have subtitles. And many of these films, by the way, are available on Netflix, Amazon. A lot of these films are available on Hotstar, and all these films are with subtitles. So you can watch these films on these platforms. Also, what has happened is that, I don't know when I came, I live and I work in Pune. I studied in this city. So when I came to Pune as an undergraduate student, I didn't think that I would go to a multiplex here, or I would go to a theater here to watch a Bengali film, right? But that's also which is happening because there is audience for non-Hindi cinema in different parts of the country. So even though I am here in Pune, I get to regularly watch Tamil films, Malayalam. May not be as many, not as many Tamil films that you would watch in Tamil Nadu, or as many Malayalam films that you would watch in Kerala, but many of these films also secure a commercial release at theaters and multiplexes here. So I get to see these Tamil films and Malayalam films at theaters also, and these films play with subtitles. Right, so there's subtitles everywhere. Have to. So what sort of career options does one have for bachelor work? Have you watched any films? Yes, I have seen. I have seen those films. Well, by backstage, I'm also trying to understand that if you're trying to talk about, so as I said, film is collaborative work, right? Camera, editing, sound. There's so much. So just people who are in front of the camera don't make films. People who are in front of the camera are important ingredients there. But would a film just be made if you put people in front of camera? There are many people who are working around that space who are also making film. Right? So I think all these people are here. You need editors, you need cameramen, you need even the extras that you see when you're watching a song. You see the hero or the so-called central main lead, dancing, but right behind him you have a bunch of others. And to me, those are also important people working with him. They are also ingredient to the scene. And films with the stories talking about grim truth. The youth of today ought to know their history. The youth of today ought to know social reality, ought to know political history, ought to know the politics of this country, ought to know the history of this country to be able to be more informed, right? And when you see that somebody is being wrongly trolled, or I mean, forget trolling, even to know for yourself what is right and what is wrong. And how do you educate yourself? You educate yourself by knowing, So you have to educate yourselves. You have to know that what is happening and what is wrong, right? And how do you do that? You read books, you watch films, And I'm sure your teachers are doing that in school, by telling you what to see, what to watch. It's just not as if, I don't think it's just the job of teachers. It's just not the job of whom we meet in our classroom spaces. I think a lot of these things also happen beyond our classroom spaces, when we are also seeking what we want to see and what we want to hear and know. So I think education is the best weapon to fight misinformation, to fight fake news. And as you rightly said, there's a lot of it happening around us, and we have to resist it. Mm. Oh, where can you study filmmaking? Well, the Film and Television Institute of India in Pune is a very prime institution. In fact, I live very close to the Film and Television Institute of India. It's barely a few minutes away. So the Film Institute, FTII, is very important. There is the SRFTI, Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute of India in Calcutta, and there are a bunch of private filmmaking schools. So there are many, many options for filmmaking. But I think what a school could also do, and what happens, I know, in a lot of these schools, is they make you watch tons and tons of cinema. That you have to watch a lot of cinema. So maybe that is something you could start doing now. If you're interested in filmmaking, if you want to be a filmmaker, please educate yourself. Please watch cinema. And just watching cinema isn't good enough. Read whatever you can. Read history, read geography, read politics, read political science, read whatever. Right? All of this will contribute to the films that you make. Because what are you making? You're making films that are set in a certain part of the world. Need not be necessarily India, it could be anywhere. And what is that world? That part of the world has a certain reality. It is set somewhere, it is trying to say something, and you also need to know what you want to say. And how will all these things happen unless you know what you want to say? So I think it's very important to do that. Uh, uh, that's a good suggestion. Just the sound and switch off the video. I haven't done that, but maybe I will. Thanks for the suggestion. Uh, any comments on the television, Raman? Oh, I don't watch most of sort of the sitcoms that play on Indian channels because there's barely anything to watch. It does not sustain my interest. I also find a lot of them regressive, particularly the Saas Bahu type of serials. Extremely regressive because it may be somebody's reality, but I don't think it's definitive, and it's very problematic the way it's represented and nothing else. Because when you look at your prime time television, what plays on prime time television, particularly some of the soap operas that you're indicating, uh, absolutely what you rightly said, that overdressed ladies and melodrama, it is problematic. It is dumbing down of content. It doesn't make you think. It doesn't. There's nothing happening in those soap operas. So no, I don't waste my time. And I'm glad you find them down. I agree with you 100%. Okay. You know, I think anybody can write a review. You don't have to be a so-called film scholar or expert to write a review. And so you said that you are a girl of 12. Am I entitled to write reviews of films? Spend so much of effort and money about making a film, should I share it? Now again, please understand that when we say reviews, does reviewing a film or reviewing anything necessarily mean that you have to say bad things about it? I don't think so. A review could also be an expression of immense joy that is received through watching a film. So who says film reviewing or reviewing anything does not mean only negative comments. It does not mean only negative criticism, right? It could be a combination of negative and positive. It could be just the positives or it could be the negative. It depends on what you are watching. And as I was also telling you towards the end of my talk, that I think anybody can write a review. You can write a review for yourself. And why are we only thinking of reviews vis-a-vis publication? That we are writing reviews to publish. I don't think that's important. You are writing reviews for yourself. You are writing reviews maybe just to share with your friends, or you are writing the review to tell people to go and watch a film, or just, I don't know, spreading the joy of having seen a good work of art, which you think many more people ought to see. Right? So a review could be a combination. A review could be positive, negative. A review could be completely negative. Like I have written negative reviews. At the same time, I have written reviews which are extremely joyous. And let me also tell you, there is no fun writing a negative review. If I will make that admission, there's no fun writing a negative review. I love it when I have good things to say. But again, if you think there's something problematic, that there are bad things happening here, you have to say it. And I think that's a responsibility that each one of us, we have to fulfill that. And just not the responsibility of somebody writing for a newspaper, it's also your responsibility. So what if you're writing an email? So what if you're doing a Facebook post? Yet it is a responsibility. Okay. Okay, we just have few minutes left. I'm really sorry. I can't take more questions. We are running out of time. Um, so my closing remarks are watch films closely, like how you read a book closely. Your teachers will ask you that you read a book, read a novel with pen, pad, paper. You are minutely noticing multiple things and many things to notice when we are watching films. And so look at where the film is set in, what are the people doing there, who are the characters, what kind of struggles are being shown, what is the story. And then I think at the end of the day, another important question to ask is, what did the film really mean to you? You know, did it really mean anything to you? And by meaning, I'm just not talking of very literal, how we understand meaning literally, but also perhaps that, what did the film do to me? Did the film add anything to what I already knew? Did it magnify? Did it alter my worldview? Did it give me a new sort of way to look at a particular issue? Um, to sort of almost create a new worldview? How did the film add, right? And at the same time, please don't have a submissive position that you are watching a film because a film has to constantly tell you. You can also fight with the film. You can question a film, and please do that. So when you are watching a film or any art form for that matter, reading a book, don't abandon your questioning spirit. Don't watch it from a point of submission. There are a lot of things to learn, but at the same thing, perhaps there are a lot of things that are not true. There are a lot of things that are problematic. So we also ought to question what we are watching. So let us be conscious viewers of cinema. And those will be my closing remarks. Okay, is that okay? Okay, last question. I think I can take one more question. Okay, last question. So I can take one last question. Uh, uh, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. That, I think you'll ask questions when you're involved. Questioning will also come from involvement, that the film has made you think, right? It could be that you also get involved and you are wondering that, why is this objectification happening? Why is this depiction happening? That is also because you see the film and you wonder that this is not right. So I don't know how detachment works here. I think I would say it's involvement, that it's a kind of provocation. It's a provocation which is making you ask these kind of questions, and I think it's a much needed provocation that makes you ask these questions, right? And the same provocation which will lead you to appreciation, at the same time a provocation which will also lead you to perhaps saying that these are things that are terribly wrong with the film, and these things ought to change in the film, right? So I don't think here that detachment works in that way, right? You're watching film, you're involved, and you're asking questions and also seeking perhaps some answers from things. Okay, so it was wonderful talking to all of you, and thank you so much for being such a wonderfully engaged audience. Thanks once again to Shraddha, Setika, Takshila Society for giving me this opportunity to dialogue with you. And I hope you'll watch more films and you'll think about cinema more and write as much as you can. Thank you so much. And take care, stay safe.